here's Brody Brazil.
You know, I think the entire premise of this video simply boils down to human nature. This is just how it goes when renderings are released for anything these days. In this case, it's a baseball stadium in Las Vegas. We have our first glance. We have our initial impressions. And then the hours and days go by, and we're still hungry for a little bit more detail and information. So we zoom in a little bit more. Yeah, that's me like pinching in on the screen. And we find out more details that weren't necessarily supposed to be there. Like, these are conceptual by nature. This is supposed to be a big picture idea. It's not really about the details. But man, there's a lot of Easter eggs in the details of these renderings. So that's what we're going to go through in this video, just to have some fun, just to point some things out that maybe you did not see at first glance. Beginning with the scoreboard and beginning with the A's lineup, which I say this in no offense to Esteury Ruiz, Zach Geloff, Ryan Noda, Brent Rooker, Shea Langoliers, Seth Brown, Aledmys Diaz, Jordan Diaz, or Nick Allen. But look at those batting averages. And as Brent Rooker said on social media the other day, he was catching strays because so many people were saying, wait, you're a 303 hitter? Now look, all of these individuals are capable of such feats. Nobody's hitting 445 here. I totally get that. But obviously the A's team batting average in the last couple years is what it is, and what numbers were they supposed to put up there? So it kind of puts everybody in a little bit of a difficult, uncomfortable spot to project all of that. And I mean, look at Zach Geloff. He's batting here. He's kind of the headliner. But yeah, everybody's average a little inflated, to say the least, and it's definitely a conversation starter. Okay, how about this look out at center field, and the pitcher, and the batter, and the umpire? Where do we begin here? Okay, the batter is supposed to be Zach Geloff, but whoever that is not even wearing A's team colors. Now, we know the A's are in this hypothetical game playing the Angels, and they are wearing red, like red tops on the other side. I don't know what that says across their chest, but the batter itself here is not wearing even green nor gold. How about the center fielder for the Angels? By the way, I also found it interesting. The Angels lineup on that same scoreboard did not feature Anthony Rendon. Curiously. What's going on with the center fielder's right or left leg? I can't tell if that person is facing the other way or this way. That's a pretty awkward twist for a leg. You might want to go get that checked out. And how about the umpire? Does the umpire think they're going to play shortstop after this? Have you ever seen an umpire with high socks like that? There's only one umpire on this field, but again, I'm not discrediting the renderings. I actually looked at the Chicago White Sox recent renderings. They too only depict one umpire on the field. Does any of this matter? Again, not necessarily, but it's fun to look at. Okay, the next image here. We're in the fan section, right behind home plate. There's a lot of AI at work here, artificial intelligence. And I'm not an expert in this field by any means. I don't know that any of us are, because it's still relatively new to us to create images based on text requests. But that's an interesting pair of sunglasses that this person is wearing. Is that a half visor? Like, what exactly is going on there? How about that jersey? The pinstripes in a V shape on the back? I don't really know what's going on there, or if I've ever seen that in real life. Let's go back to the roof, and specifically the ceiling. Now, a lot of people still have the question, is that entire ceiling span area that's neon green there, is that actually all one screen? Now, it would make sense that it's one big video board because there really is no definition of the scoreboard itself. But if it's a video board, then how come we can also kind of see right through it to the structure which holds up the roof there? It doesn't all make sense, and again, it's not supposed to at this point. These are all just general ideas, but we are pretty close to having to figure out more specifics of this baseball park. Specifics like the left field fence. And again, these are decisions that can be made over time, but have you ever seen a plexiglass fence on a baseball stadium? I mean, certainly it would be fun. It would be optimal to have your fans out there at ground level. Maybe that's part of the casino or hotel project. You can walk right up to the field. But even cyclone fences these days in Major League Baseball have heavy regulations about how much you can use, how much padding has to go around them. This would not be safe to have a center fielder trying to make a leaping catch into what looks like hockey boards and glass, like at a hockey rink. just does not seem like something that's practical here. So I don't think that whole left field fence area is reality, but it certainly is interesting. Like I admire the concept. I admire the thought of something like that, but I don't know if that's possible. I also don't know what the third base coach is doing right there. I mean, if that is really Zach Geloff, and Zach Geloff pulls one down the line, that third base coach better watch out. They're about to get blasted with a line drive. Let's take another look here down the right field line. Couple things to point out. Easter eggs, again, so to speak. Details that if you just look at the image once, you wouldn't notice all this stuff. But when you really pay attention, that foul pole is actually in the stands. It looks like it's in row 3 or 4. It's definitely not lined up with the actual foul line, but that's fine. It's all perspective here. It's also not the bright yellow color that I think baseball requires it to be. How about the dugout steps and ledge here? Oh my goodness. If you're a first baseman and you're going for a pop-up here, I hope you're paying attention to your feet because that would be super easy to slip inside that dugout. There's just a ledge. No railing, no nothing. Look at the steps right in the middle. I've never seen a baseball dugout that looks like that. But again, this is all conceptual. It just doesn't have the fine detail that a baseball fan might come to expect. Or even, how about the distance down the right field line? Now, that is one detail we really can't take away from these renderings. What are the dimensions of this field? It's really hard to even see the shape, the geometry of this field, like in the playing surface, because the only angle we have is from inside and it's super low behind home plate. But how far is it down the right field line? And if there is some altitude in Las Vegas and the field has to be a little bit bigger, are we talking 342, 345 down the right field line? There's no dimensions anywhere on that outfield fence. All right, let's go back into the stands here. A couple other AI things to point out, like, for example, 42, but the 4 is backward on the jersey? That's not a new Fanatics thing, is it? I kid. How about this fan whose face kind of just disappears into nothing over there? Again, these are artificial intelligence images. They've got to be. There's a couple different heads going on there in that situation, like maybe half a head attached to a different head. There's this person wearing a backpack that just kind of ends on their back. It's like they're almost wearing 2 different shirts. They have 2 different shoulder lines. That's kind of interesting. Then there's this view of right field, and you're wondering, all right, well, what am I pointing out here? Is it all those rows of seats there? There's like literally the first row of that first section, the first row of that upper section in right field. Now, I'm not looking at that. I'm saying, where is the actual bullpen area for the home and visiting team on this field? There's no bullpens reflected. But again, that was an issue we saw in the Bjarke Ingels group renderings of the Howard Terminal ballpark several years back too. Bullpens were not included. You'd have to think somehow, some way, they'll actually be put in under those seats. They don't do them on the fields anymore. In fact, at Ballpark, way before it was SBC Park, AT&T Park, Oracle Park, at Ballpark, they actually forgot to design in bullpens literally until the very end, like until construction was almost complete. So they put them on the field, and then several years ago, they moved them out towards center field. So it just goes to show you, these are all things that can be remedied over time, but they're definitely not included in these conceptual renderings. A lot of people noticed all the flags, and they're everywhere in these renderings. They're in the third deck, they're down the first baseline, they're down the third baseline. A lot of flags. And in this case, they're all kind of blowing in different directions. I mean, that one's kind of pointing towards third base. I guess that one is also, too, pointing towards the outfield. That one's kind of pointing in, like the wind is coming from left field. But wait a second. This is a closed dome stadium. And unless the air conditioning system is, like, really kicking here, where's this wind coming from? How are those flags flying inside a dome? Interesting, right? Just something to consider. I know they were put there for effect. They are in existence here to kind of dress up the image and kind of make it more appealing to the eye, but what exactly is going on there? Let's go back to the roof, and more specifically the ceiling, the inside of this roof structure. You'll notice they're playing a day game here. And that's fine because natural light, I suppose, to some degree can help with the interior lighting, but there's also no lights represented in these renderings. Other people have also pointed out there's no HVAC ducting, like there's no air conditioning system that's installed, which you would definitely need for that large glass structure out in left field. It's going to let in light. It's also going to let in some heat in the Las Vegas summer. No lighting depicted at all. No roof structure also depicted at all. Every dome I've ever been in, every retractable roof stadium I've ever been in, it includes a bunch of catwalk structures and maintenance areas and places you can go to get to the ceiling part of the roof for repairs or whatever's necessary up there. It's just kind of interesting how simplistic this all is. But the biggest thing I wanted to point out is that there's no lights anywhere represented in these renderings, which, again, is not a deal breaker. In the end, it's just interesting right now that we don't see it. Here's something else that's curious. It's an Easter egg as part of these designs. We're looking towards the southeast here. Now, this seems to me like sunset, start of a baseball game. It makes sense, right? But doesn't the sun set in the west? This is to the east, and the sky is completely orange. I mean, this photo that they're using, the real photo in the background, was clearly from a sunrise, but this is meant to reflect a sunset. So we'll never see that situation that a baseball game is starting as the sun is actually rising over those mountains. But it's that image I want to zoom in on a little bit closer. Again, we've mostly been focusing on the home plate view. Here's that different look from the left center field area, and there's the upper deck, which you'll notice has no aisles at all. Now, the last round of renderings that came out back in May, they didn't have aisles either, but I would have expected that maybe as we get closer, things get a little bit more realistic. You get an idea of how many sections are up there. How do fans get from the sections to the concourse? Is there an upper and a lower concourse, or is this just a one concourse construction project? We don't really know. And again, there's no real depiction of how many sections are up there. How do people move around? That looks like standing room only seating. No, standing room only area to me. There's no standing room seating. But it also looks like there's not as many fans that should be there too. It's interesting that there's standing room only on the first deck, second deck, third deck. There's a fourth deck here. There's actually a fifth deck if you include this one little section right here, which I would expect might be luxury suites. And wait a second. As far as I can tell on these renderings, there also are no luxury suites. So these are just some interesting things to point out, things that if you looked in a little bit closer, you start to notice these details. And again, let's be very clear. They're meant to give an overall conceptual idea of where this is headed. These are not the blueprints. You cannot build off of what you just saw. But it sure is interesting to zoom in, have a little bit of fun with what you can see and what makes sense and what leaves you scratching your head. You made it here to the end of the video. You know I really appreciate that. Thumbs up down below. Also, don't forget to subscribe to the channel so I can definitely see you back here next time.